Hello and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast, everyone. I'm Movie Bear podcast co-host, and this week, fill-in Movie Bear podcast host, Jim Puliafco, and I'm joined by my friend and other Movie Bear podcast co-host, Will Lindis. Hi, Will.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, so each week, this gathering, only two of us this week, huggable hairy homos converge to talk movies, usually movie discussions, reviews, but also sometimes some movie news, some fun interviews with guests sometimes, and general fun movie shenanigans. And this week, as we careen toward the Christmas holiday in a couple of weeks, we're going to review the new Christmas-themed sequel movie, Bad Santa 2, and another film that has absolutely zero to do with Christmas, and a highly anticipated and buzzed about movie that we all finally got to see called Moonlight. So we're excited to talk about these movies. And I mentioned there were only two of us, and our normally stalwart host, Brad, had some work commitments and couldn't make it onto the show, leaving you, our beloved listeners and viewers, in the hands of just Will and I. So, Will, I guess we'll
capable hands they are, Jim. You're doing a great job. I think that we should incorporate Huggy as a phrase. Like I see a T-shirt with our logo and Huggy on it. Like that's the new fifth H. Like when they do the spinoff, when they do the inevitable like sequel to Movie Bears podcast, it'll be Movie Bears podcast 2, Huggy.
Yeah, because we're like huggable and huggy. You know what I mean?
I think so, both work. Yeah.
We're giving and receiving hugs.
Oh, whoa, yeah. Oh, hugs. We're talking hugs.
When it comes to hugs, yeah.
Okay. I thought we were veering into a different territory, but that's not an H.
Anyway, we'll try our best to do Brad, our beloved absent host, proud, but we'll have to see how that turns out. You think we can toe that line, Will?
Oh yeah, I think I know Brad's rooting us on right now. He had a work commitment; those come up, those happen. From time to time. We love to be here every week, all three of us, gabbing with one another. This is sort of our this is like our dinner table, and this is where the three of us come to chat each week. And it sucks when one of us has to miss for one reason or another, but the show must go on. We shoulder forward. Always some great movie discussion to be had. So. Yeah, I'm excited about the ones we got on deck for tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm definitely excited. We'll see how this discussion actually goes. Two very different films we got to talk about.
Yeah, I'm excited about the discussion. I'm not always. It's one of those things where like. Even movies that I don't enjoy as much, and maybe I'm tipping my hat a little bit too much for some discussions that we're about to have. But even a movie that I don't enjoy, I still enjoy the discussion and hearing what other people think about it, or maybe finding out if there's something that I missed. Sometimes we come to these and, one of us is just absolutely just like, nope, worst movie ever. And then we hear some things that are just like, okay, I hadn't quite considered it from that angle. Maybe it doesn't turn it into a great film, but it sometimes can illuminate something that was missed beforehand. So yeah, we got two films on deck, and even if one of them is stronger than the other, I'm going to enjoy talking about both.
Mm-hmm. And we'll have to see about that. But the first film we have to talk about is, as I mentioned, a Christmas-themed movie. We're a couple of weeks away from Christmas. And the holidays, and hopefully people will enjoy some kind of holiday break. But let's launch into our review of Bad Santa 2. Okay, I'm going to kick this one off by telling our viewers that we're going to talk about Bad Santa 2 spoiler-free for the first segment, and then we'll give you fair warning when we launch into spoilers, so you can and also we'll put time tags in the show notes so that you can jump around the spoilers if you don't want spoilers for either movie. We'll treat both movies that way. So let me give you the quick synopsis of Bad Santa 2. Fueled by cheap whiskey, greed, and hatred, Willie teams up once again with his angry little sidekick, Marcus, to knock off a Chicago charity on Christmas Eve. So you've got this Bad Santa 2. It's the sequel to Bad Santa. 13 years between the original movie and this movie. This one's directed by a guy named Mark Waters. This one brings back Billy Bob Thornton as Willie, the Bad Santa. We've got Tony Cox back as his sidekick. We've also got Brett Kelly back as Thurman Merman, who was about, I don't know, 11 or 12 in the first movie. And then he's back again. And to add to these, we've got Kathy Bates, we've got Christina Hendricks. So we've got a pretty good cast here. I love the original Bad Santa. It's one of my favorite holiday movies going, because I thought it was a great combination of like edgy, very irreverent, politically incorrect at a lot of times, comedy, but also had some heart in it to go along with the holiday, and kind of a heartwarming story about this loser Willie who befriends Brett Kelly, Thurman Merman, and kind of an unlikely pairing and friendship. So it's been 13 years, but I don't think 13 was the lucky number for Bad Santa 2, unfortunately. I love the first movie so much. Maybe my expectations were super high. We'll see. But I was just disappointed in this movie overall. It definitely didn't have the same comic snap. I think they kind of merely a retread of the original story, just kind of an updating of the original story with nothing really to like elevate it above the original or even into the same arena. I don't think. I mean, not even close in the same ballpark, which is unfortunate because, you had the makings of, I think you had the right elements in terms of the cast, right? With Billy Bob, Tony Cox, you had, Kathy Bates. I mean, what's she going to bring? Very talented. Christina Hendricks. But it just fell flat. I mean, for me, there were a few little chuckles here and there, and one or two generally nice scenes toward the end, I thought, with a bit of heart for this kind of movie. But they were overshadowed by like an overarching sense of this one, like being thrown together for the sequel bucks. That, they had waited long enough, a dozen or so years, time to get a sequel out there, maybe rake in some cash. I don't know how it's going to do. I'm not even sure I'll give it a second thought again. But again, just almost everyone in the movie, you got a sense that was kind of going through the motions without really a spark the original movie had. It may be easy to think that we can chalk up what I consider to be kind of the flatness of this movie, or to like there's a completely new set of writers, a different director than the original. Yeah, you have the same actors, but definitely the writing seemed a little different to me. It's almost like they gave the writers and directors the task of, go write Bad Santa 2. Here's the first movie. You're going to get all these returning actors. Funny movie, and what they ended up with was just not very good. And it just really kind of bummed me out after liking the first one so much and having those high expectations. This one just didn't have close to the same spark. Will, I don't know if you had the same feeling, but
yeah,
let me hear what you thought.
Yeah, for me, so going back to Bad Santa, the first one, I enjoyed that film quite a bit too. I think that, probably comparing the two of us, I think you probably loved it, more than I did, but I enjoy it quite a bit. I think the first Bad Santa had this beautiful blend of kind of raunchy, inappropriate behavior, but also heart. And it worked because those two counterbalanced each other so well. So fast forward 13 years to Bad Santa 2, and it's like if you've got some of the same ingredients on the shelf, but they're completely lopsided and out of balance when you're making the soup that is this film. I guess to that point, I hated Bad Santa 2. Like this is... I do kind of a running tally of my rankings of films for the year. I gave this one a half star out of 5 stars for what it's worth. I had exactly one laugh in this entire movie, and it was more of a light chuckle. I think the biggest problem here is, and I mentioned the balance being off. This film really, really doubles down on the inappropriate behavior. And I have no problem with that. I love a good, raunchy, wrong blue comedy. I love that stuff. But it has to be funny. It has to work. Otherwise, it just feels juvenile. Here, we had a lot of the characters just kind of slinging insults at each other, but there weren't really any jokes crafted around those insults. It was just them saying shocking things for the sake of being shocking. And the other problem with it, too, is that you had the inclusion of this new Kathy Bates character who she's fine, you know, but the character is also inappropriate and raunchy and raw. Same with the Tony Cox character. Same with the Billy Bob Thornton character. You have a lot less of the heart elements. And when those do come in, they feel kind of slapdash and sort of tacked on, like Jim, you mentioned kind of at the end. So I found myself just running out the clock on this one. I have very little nice to say about this movie, which is unfortunate because we've been looking forward to this one. It's like, hey, Christmas, it's time for another Bad Santa film. Let's do this. I think the only thing I legitimately can say that I enjoyed there were a couple of moments with, you know, like you mentioned, Brett Kelly is back, Thurman Merman. And while the character is... there's some problems there, and it doesn't always lend itself to humor. It actually lends itself to some, like, what are you thinking, scriptwriters type things. There were a couple of scenes that featured him where I felt like, you know, at least I had something to grab onto. Like, okay, this is at least interesting. This is something. Yeah, I hate to rag on this film, but it's fucking awful.
I think those things, Will, that we liked about it in terms of the heart and the story kind of came at the end, maybe too late.
Oh, way too late. Yeah.
For this movie to work. I don't know. A lot of the comedy, like you're right. I don't know if they really doubled down on it because there were moments I'm like, this movie needs to just go balls to the wall and give us even more. For me, it was kind of stuck in that middle zone. Like, we're going through the motions, we're coming up with these as many insults as we can throw, but it never really like pushed the envelope for me.
I think we're kind of saying similar. Like what I mean it doubled down is I don't mean that it necessarily was like more inappropriate. It just spent a larger percentage of its runtime trying to be inappropriate. It was more quality and less more quantity and less quality. There were long scenes where the characters would just sit around and insult each other, but there weren't really any jokes. There wasn't anything really funny. There wasn't any comedic payoff to the scenes. It's just, oh, that one's short. Oh, that one has a drinking problem. Are we going to hear that same joke again? Yeah, we are. We're going to hear that same joke 18 more times in the next 18 minutes. And that was the problem for me. It's like you could make a movie that is, and we've seen it, like where it goes all out and makes every second of screen time count, pushes the envelope, makes you sick to your stomach at some of the things you see, and that's fine as long as it's crafted comedically. This wasn't. This was just, I mean, this is probably the laziest script that we've seen on screen this year, and that's, you know, that's not just hyperbole. I'm struggling to think of a script that I felt phoned it in more than this one.
Yeah, you're right. And I think one of the other things that this movie was missing and might have benefited from it, the original movie had an X factor of some of the supporting characters in that movie. You had the mall manager played by John Ritter. Now, you know, rest in peace, John Ritter. He's no longer with us. Amazing talent that I think passed away shortly after that movie was made. But he brought just kind of that like off kilter, you know, angle to the movie and that character, and that livened up the movie for me. Also, Bernie Mac as the mall security, you know, head of security, crooked head of security, who had some. You almost get the sense that some of that movie, the original movie, might have even been ad-libbed, like on the scene with the actors. Okay. And there was a magic to that was happening that you were seeing on the screen. Whereas this one, it just all seemed like super scripted and, okay, I'm going to read the jokes. I'm going to do the best I can to be funny. And that just didn't work, at least on me as audience of this movie.
There's something to be said for a film where you feel as though like the act, especially a comedy, but
Yeah.
where it seems like everyone is enjoying what they're doing on set. And I
Right.
never got that. It's like if I was watching a bunch of zombies just kind of go from scene to scene, insulting one another, knocking out plot beats, and then credits. Again, the only one who looked like they were actually having fun was Brett Kelly, who is
Yeah.
not in a whole lot of things. And then there was one other actress, and she wasn't very well written, the character, but the actress Ginny Zagrino, who played the security guard DeLuca. I mean, she at least felt like she was trying to put in the effort, but I don't think there was anything she could have done to have salvaged it.
No. I'm with you. I think we're together on this, and rather than beat up the movie a lot, do we want to talk any spoilers about this movie? Is there much worth talking about in spoilers? That's a call we can make.
Yeah, I know that is a good call we can make. I feel like we probably have more to say about the next movie. So I mean, spoiler alert, we don't like this movie very much.
Right.
You know, I think we're fine to move to the next one.
Yeah, and there really isn't much. I mean, I'm not going to give away any of the plot here, but the plot here is surprisingly similar and derivative of the first movie, just like 12 years later or 13 years later. That's what it seemed like to me. There's a heist involved. That's not a spoiler. That's in the trailer, in the synopsis. And there's, some bad characters doing bad things, but just not very funny this time around.
And not only not that they're not funny, but also that there was something really different about Willie, the Billy Bob Thornton character this go around, where I felt like in the first movie, you kind of rooted for him. Even when he did stuff that he wasn't supposed to, you're kind of like, nah, come on, you got to get over this. You're kind of rooting for the guy to get over his own crap, like you want. And this movie, I don't feel like there was anything as likable about this character. He just felt like a weird shadow of his former self. I think that comes to just lazy script writing. I feel like it's sometimes with sequels, you get this thing that happens where someone gets the wrong impression of why a film was successful. Bad Santa 2 or Bad Santa, super successful. We need to do another one. Okay, what was successful about it? What do people love? He was the Santa that cursed. Great, let's make a movie about another Santa that curses. While again skipping the fact that the comedy worked, the humor was more organic, that the heart was kind of infused all the way through the film. And that's unfortunately sequelitis. We see that a lot with comedy sequels. I was hoping we'd avoid it here, but it fell right into that trap.
Yeah, so a disappointment, I think, for me, and more than a disappointment for Will, unfortunately. So I think we'll just maybe leave this one right here.
This one's recommendation already
from us. No recommendation from us. Listen to our plugs at the end of the show if you want. If you're thinking of going to see Bad Santa 2, you might want to listen to our plugs and see if you can find something in there to go watch, or maybe even our next movie if you haven't seen it yet. So, let's do that. Let's transition into something different, much different than Bad Santa 2. This is a movie called Moonlight. So, Will, why don't you kick off Moonlight and we'll talk about this one.
Absolutely. So, Moonlight, the synopsis ripped right from IMDb. A timeless story of human connection and self-discovery. Moonlight chronicles the life of a young black man from childhood to adulthood as he struggles to find his place in the world while growing up in the rough neighborhood of Miami. So Miami is a film that, especially if you're paying attention to film Twitter or kind of like the pre-award buzz, like this film is starting to pop up quite a bit. It's showing up on a lot of like top 10 lists and top 25 lists. And no surprise here because this is an absolutely excellent film. One that will be ranking very highly on my own end of year list. I absolutely adore this film. I think part of what I appreciate so much about it, just from a thematic perspective, is Here, we are an LGBT film podcast, and so we see LGBT films kind of mixed in with kind of the mainstream general release stuff. And there's sometimes this rut of queer cinema where a lot of not all, but there's a lot of films that kind of fall into the same beats and the same categories, and it can be really hard to distinguish them. Moonlight feels like such a breath of fresh air in that not only is it like a standout amongst just like queer cinema, but also against cinema as a whole. Like, it is an excellent film. The film is basically broken into 3 segments, and it follows this one character named, was it Chiron? Was that how it was pronounced?
I think it was Chiron, yeah.
Yeah, and it shows him first as a young man of like 8-9 years old. And I'm going to briefly summarize each of the parts without hitting any spoilers.
Actually, I think it was Chiron. I think it was Chiron.
You're right. It is Chiron, yeah. And the first story is like him at 8 years old. He's got some issues with his mother, and he runs into this character named Juan, played by Mahershala Ali. And he becomes sort of a surrogate father figure. The second part shows Chiron as a teenager, dealing with some of the different interesting firsts that you experience in your teenage years, while also dealing with the fact that he doesn't quite fit in with some of the other kids at school. And the third part of the film shows Chiron as a young man, probably like mid-20s or so, and dealing with kind of the path his life has taken, and kind of the things that the first 2 segments, how they've kind of shaped him into who he is. Every part of this film, it is a beautifully shot film. Everything looks really interesting. Everything looks really beautiful and poetic and lyrical, if those types of things make sense to you from a cinematography standpoint. Every single one of the actors brings their A game. You've got 3 actors here who are playing the different ages of Chiron, and each one of them is, the casting of just these 3 leads by itself is phenomenal. Like, these 3 people all carry these like commonalities all the way through their performances, which you don't see when you have 3 people playing the same role. Mm-hmm. But going back to Mahershala Ali, definitely a standout performance. This guy is on fire this year. We've seen him in things like House of Cards and the Luke Cage series. He's playing in Hidden Figures, which comes out later this year. So this is a fantastic year for him. If you're the type of person that follows award buzz, he's definitely in the conversation for supporting actor, and well-deserved. I've got so many great things to say about this movie, and Jim, we're going to have a lot of time to say all of those things, but I want to turn it over to you to hear some of the great things, hopefully great things that you have to say about it too.
Yeah, I didn't have time to go back, but I know that I had plugged this movie pretty early on this year when I saw the first trailer come out for this movie. I know, Will, you had a chance to see this movie, I think, before we did. Was it at Fantastic Fest?
Not at Fantastic Fest, or the Austin Gay and Lesbian International Film Festival. Not part of the actual festival itself, but we do monthly screenings. So we acquired this one in
special screening.
Yeah, like in I think early October. So so not like super early. It had played at a couple festivals before that, but we got it slightly before general release, which is nice.
Yeah. Like I said, I had seen the trailer, and I'm like, wow, there's something about this trailer that tells me this is something a little bit different, and I want to see it. It was just enough. The trailer was just enough to give you a sense of what the movie was without giving too much away. And this isn't really a movie where there's a ton of spoilers. Let's just say I was really excited for this movie going into it. Not for 13 years, though, like I was for Bad Santa. A totally different excitement. There was a lot of buzz around this one when the movie did start showing at film festivals. I think it was at Sundance or TIFF or some of these bigger festivals. This movie, we finally got to see it. It opened here maybe a couple of weeks ago, but we were so busy we didn't get to see it. It's everything I expected and more. Just really fantastic filmmaking and storytelling, especially, and that's what I want to talk about. I'm a storytelling guy and a character guy, and this movie is all about that. This movie isn't about plot. This movie isn't about what the character does and what other characters do for the story. It's about the characters themselves, and that's what I really resonated with about this movie. Also, this movie has a nonlinear story. I would call it a nonlinear storytelling technique because it does jump. It doesn't. It's in a chronological order. It's not in a like a linear form. And I love unique ways of telling stories, and I thought this was a really unique way. I talked about characters and the way this movie puts its strength in its character. Specifically, I mean, the Chiron character, who we get to know as, like you said, Will, a 10-year-old boy, a teen, and then as an adult, you know, late 20s or 30 years old or whatever he is. And it kind of draws you in and makes you empathize with these characters. Even the first character we see is Juan. Typically, you'll see a character like this in a movie, and this character is not portrayed this way, right? A character you might think in another movie could be a total antagonist, right, in the movie. This guy ends up being kind of, I guess it might be a spoiler, but we'll talk about that later. But a character that I really, really resonated with right off the bat. As you said, the movie's about a kid and a teen and a man dealing with his life and the realization that he is gay in a society and a community that is, you know, it's tough for anybody to deal with, but in that situation, to have those added revelations in your life to deal with and how this kid ends up dealing with it was fascinating to me. This one will be high on my list at the end of the year for films. I don't know where it's going to fall. I haven't seen some films yet, but all I'll say is try to see this one if you can, if it's playing in theaters. Fantastic performances all around. You've got Janelle Monáe in this movie, which is amazing to see her get some really quality screen time. I loved Naomi Harris in this movie. Her character I thought was fascinating, and I thought she did a great job. Just all around great stuff. I can't love on this movie anymore. I'd like to see it again. Will, I don't know if you've seen it more than once, but
not yet.
I would like to see it again. I don't know if I'll find time to do it, but if there's any movie you have to run out and see, this is one of those movies. Yeah, so loved it.
Yeah, totally agree with a lot of the things you said there, or everything you said there. This film is a character study where you basically take a character and you kind of dive into what makes them tick. And what made it so interesting to me was the fact that it was trisected into those three different parts. We've seen character studies that are just about one person at one particular point in time, and they're really fascinating, they're really interesting, you can do great things, but spreading it out over different parts of this character's life and the different identities he assumes, so to speak, or personas that define who he is just an interesting way of showing that even as a character who's kind of defined by two major categorizations, you know, that being that he's black and that being that he's queer, having these two particular things, they don't fully define him, because even within that, he has different, again, those different personas, those different aspects of his being. And I loved that. I loved that it wasn't a very cookie cutter, to the point, clear cut definition of what it is to be black and gay. It's muddy, it's awkward, it's beautiful, it's all of these great things. And I, you know, obviously I'm part of that world. You know, I'm a white man, but I'm also a gay man, so I can understand part of this. I'm not part of the other part of the world, but I love getting kind of that glimpse, and I love getting that, just seeing the story played out with such complexity. You're right, Jim. I've only seen this one once. We're kind of coming up on a good weekend, at least where I'm at, in that a lot of the films that are kind of rushing out of the gates for the award season either have just started their theatrical run and are about to expand, or they're going to be hitting around Christmas. So this weekend is actually kind of blank for me. So I'm hoping to get some time to go back and see this one again, because I want to support this film with my money. I want this film to do well. I want to reward filmmakers who take these types of risks and take this and make this type of art. That's what I want to put my money towards.
Right. I agree 100%. And talk about being, yes, I'm not a black man, but I am gay. And I came to that realization later in life. But I think there's something in here, in these characters, somewhere along these three chunks of story that you can relate to with this character. Whether it be the fact that he's dealing with being gay, he's also dealing with being gay in a very hyper macho society and community, which was fascinating to me, and how the character had to deal with that at three different points in his life. And we'll get into spoilers a little bit later, but how this manifested itself kind of later in the film was, really hit a chord with me. How he kind of came to his own realizations in his own time was really well done on film. This is I've heard it compared to the movie Boyhood, right? We talked about Boyhood several years ago. This is, in a way, it's similar in that it looks at certain distinct time slices of one person's life. In this case, it's a boy and a teen and a man. In Boyhood, it was every year for was it 12 years? I forget what it was.
Full 12.
Yeah, 12 years. In this case, it's the same idea, just executed differently. You're seeing the same character played by three different actors, though, with the same issues and dealing with different things at different times in his life, all the time, though, dealing with his identity. And so I can definitely see the parallels here. You see everything. You see a lot of things that happen in this kid's life, some good, some bad, and the people who around him who shaped him to be what he is, whether for good or for bad. And I definitely see that. I just wonder. I would love to hear maybe an interview with the director, who is Barry Jenkins, by the way, if he had any thoughts in his mind about Boyhood, and if that maybe played some kind of influence in him as a filmmaker, at least a seed or an influence in the idea. But it was fascinating to see unfold on the screen. I love both movies. I think both movies would make a great companion double feature, like Boyhood, and you have the white hetero Boyhood, and then the black gay Boyhood to Manhood movie.
Why don't you just pair that with the 7-Up series and just do a bunch of have a theme night where it's like nothing but films that feature characters. You could end that one with like Benjamin Button, just to kind of like twist switch things up on the audience. I think that there's so much to talk about here. The music is beautiful. Some of the shots in this, like there's a shot in the first third of the movie, and I think I'll talk about it more in the spoiler section. We're probably close to a segue if I'm dancing.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
There's a spot in the first segment that I think is one of my favorite shots of the year, and I think that's when you start looking at like your year-end list, like what are the things that I watched this year, what stands out. There's movies that really go in one eye and out the other. Like, you look over your list and go like, wait, I saw that? Holy crap, that was this year. And then there are movies where you immediately come to them. You immediately think about like, oh yeah, that's the scene. That's the film that has, and then the scene flashes in your brain. Like it's permanently seared there. And this film has one of those sequences, and I appreciate it so much for that. I need more films that permanently sear themselves in my brain.
Oh, I can think of probably half a dozen scenes in this film that the way that they were filmed and the poignancy or the power in the scene kind of come together and
Yeah.
cement that in your mind. And we'll talk about those in spoilers. So maybe this is a good time, Will. Uh, we're both going to recommend this movie, obviously, right, Will?
Oh, so much so.
Yeah, yeah. So this is a big recommend for both of us. We're going to be jumping into spoilers. Um, if you haven't seen the movie yet, I hate to tell you this, but you probably want to stop here, go see the movie, and then come back in and listen to our spoiler talk. But spoilers are fair game now. Will, tell us about some of that scene or some of those scenes that kind of stuck with you.
Absolutely. I think each of the three segments of this film has a defining scene for me. And I think that's what's so wonderful about it. None of the three segments felt weak. And you see that sometimes with these, an anthology film or a film that's kind of told over years. You could probably even like Boyhood, I think I liked all of those, but like there could have been someone saying, oh man, fifth grade sucked.
Yeah.
For me, each of the three parts of this film had a moment that really stood out for me. When he was a boy, we're in spoilers now. So one of the things that happens to him is he doesn't really have a stable home life. He's the littlest kid at school. His name is even Little. And he's taken in by Mahershala Ali, who is this like drug dealer and but also like kind of an upright positive role model father figure for him. And there's this moment where they go to the beach and they're swimming, and you kind of see this shot of like Mahershala Ali just kind of like holding Little as they're kind of swimming, and just at the kind of the camera bobs closer to the water, all of that. That's one of the best scenes of the year for me. Like there are scenes in the other sections that I love as well, but when I think of Moonlight, I think of that scene. That's the scene that like I feel like 5 years from now, I'll come back and think about this movie, and that scene's gonna like put a smile on my face.
Yeah, that was an amazing scene. And I want to talk more about that in a minute. But while we're talking about that first segment, there's one shot of Juan. I think it's the opening shot of the movie when he gets out of the car, and the camera is following him as he's walking in the street, right over to Juan is a kind of the area drug dealer, and he's got or he's kind of like a second level drug dealer or something, and he's got other people working on the street for him, and he's visiting one of his guys, and the camera is never stops moving. It goes around him and circles, and I really, I'm like, wow, this I don't know if I could take that for the whole movie, but it definitely made a point. You talked about the beach, the swimming scene, and there was also a scene with his. I think it was in the next section. There were a couple of scenes in the next section. One with his mother when he comes home and his mother is played by Naomi Harris, is strung out on drugs, and she's screaming at him, and you don't hear what she's saying because it's totally muted. It's totally slowed down. And it was just so powerful because you kind of knew what she was saying to him, and she was berating him. She was probably saying a lot of mean things to him to tear him down because she was in a bad place. That scene really stayed with me. Just so much in this movie. But back to the swimming scene, I want to talk about the Juan character, because here's this character that comes on the scene. He's the first character we see. He's driving this car that's all tricked out. He's in the neighborhood. He's got this crown on the dashboard that kind of declares that he's the king of the streets. And it's out of the car. He's got all his jewelry on. He's a player on the scene. And for some reason, he comes across our Sharon as a boy who we call Little, and he takes a liking to him. And he kind of acts as a mentor and a father figure because he senses that something is wrong at home. And it was a little strange for me because I didn't know where that was going to go. Something inside me told me maybe, and the movie never got to this, and I know that Juan lived with his girlfriend Teresa, or wife, I couldn't tell, who's played by Janelle Monáe. Maybe he sensed that this kid was different. You know what I mean? And he definitely sensed that he was different and felt that he needed to protect him. I just wonder if there was some gay empathy going on between the two characters that was kind of unspoken in the movie. Did you get that sense at all?
I didn't. What I got was kind of what you hit on just a moment ago, was the Juan character noticed that there's just like something different about this kid, in that like he's not fitting in. He's sensitive. He's smaller. He's being picked on. And what he does is he comes in and he becomes this comforting blanket for Little's insecurities. There's even a scene at the dinner table in that first moment or in that first segment, where he's first asking about, what's a faggot, and the reaction for him from Juan was sort of what led me to believe, I don't think there's any gay undertones to the character, as much as this was a character who was more I think his response was more don't let anybody in the world ever give you shit for who you are. So I didn't catch necessarily gay undertones as much as just, this is a character who exudes empathy, and we would expect him not to. We would expect this character, he's a hard guy living on the streets, pushing drugs. We would expect this guy to be an asshole. That's what we would expect from any other movie. And for him to be one of the two most empathetic characters in the film, I think is maybe part of what we're picking up on. Just that amount of empathy. I wish there were more people in the world who, and there are plenty of people in the world who do this, but I wish there were more people in the world who just personified this feeling of I want you to be who you are, and I will fight for your right to be who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just so many things were going through my mind, with this Juan character, what are his motivations to be so nice to this kid? And obviously he presented a certain persona physically by his appearance, but there was a different character under the skin, and I didn't know if that character was, we knew he was a drug dealer. Was he maybe trying to recruit Little at some point? You know what I mean? There was never any of that in the movie, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, when's the scene going to come where he asks him, to carry something down the street, or, something like that? You've seen that in other movies, and this movie subverted that expectation to me, and that's to its credit, right? Mm-hmm. But then I started thinking maybe something happened in Juan's life similar to Little when he was growing up. Maybe he was a sensitive type at one point. I mean, we saw by the end of the movie, I was thinking even more so, because we saw the kind of character that Sharon grew up to be, which was almost a complete mirror image of the Juan character, right?
Right.
At least outwardly, right? He even had almost the same car and crown on the dashboard. Might have even been Juan's crown for all we know.
I think it was.
Yeah, but I thought that was interesting, and so it just shows the kind of circular nature of what kind of comes around goes around.
The importance of both nature and nurture.
Yeah. Right. But that was probably the most unexpected part of the movie for me. Is there? I kind of want to jump to the end, but I don't want to skip over anything that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, there's one spot in the middle I want to talk about before we get to the end. Just in terms of impressive camera work and shots that jump out. In the middle sequence, there's two really good standout scenes. The one where he has his first, gay moment with this other kid, this much more confident kid. But there's the scene shortly after that where he thinks man, this is a change for everything. Everything is going to change for me. And then the tougher kids at school kind of convinced the kid that he had this sexual encounter with to fight him. And there's this spot where everything is swirling, everything is spinning around each other. It's this one gorgeous, chaotic, terrifying spinning shot. And I think that it's one of those things where camera work can sometimes help mirror tumultuous emotions and things like that. And this was perfectly shot for that. So when I think about the middle segment of the movie, that's the scene that, again, seared my brain.
Oh yeah, definitely. I that scene was out. The fight scene, I'll call it, was outstanding. And by the way, the character who played Sharon in the middle part of the movie, the actor, I thought was fantastic. Just for me, that was probably the strongest part of the movie. Hey, guess who's here?
Hi, everybody. Sorry I can't be here today. I'm working.
Brad's in.
Boo.
Howdy, Brad.
We're talking Moonlight.
Oh my gosh, the movie was so good.
See?
Yeah.
So now it is unanimous.
There you go. I gotta go, guys. Love you.
Love you.
Bye. So yeah, I thought the middle part of that movie was so strong. Because we've got kind of the budding, he's starting to understand who he is, having his first experience, which I thought was very well and very realistically kind of played out with this character who you don't know if he's straight, or if he's gay, or if he's bi, or if he's, what the deal is. But yeah, I love that part of the movie, but wanted to kind of skip ahead toward the end. We see now Sharon, he's grown up, and I think his name is Black. Is that right?
Yeah, the first section he's little because he's the little kid. The second he's Chiron, where he's like trying to figure out his own identity and who he is. And at the end, he's Black and he is hardened.
Yeah. And so he ends up meeting, Brad's teasing me over here. He ends up meeting up with Kevin, I think is the character's name, that he kind of had this short little fling with, I guess, when he was younger. I don't know. It wasn't clear if they ever had a quote relationship, but it was a crush kind of thing that was happening, and some lust happened, and for some reason he ends up getting a call from Kevin, or was it the other way around? You remember how it went down?
Oh, let's see. He gets the call from Kevin, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think he gets a call from Kevin and asks him what's up, asks him to visit sometime, and he visits, and they have this amazing scene in this place where Kevin works. It's a diner where he's a cook, and he says he'll cook you something, and he comes in, and that scene was played really just so well. Like, had that feeling of like coming across old feelings that were so buried, and you had to shed all this stuff, your kind of your outer skin, to kind of show who you really were. And I think during that scene, Sharon actually takes the fronts off of his teeth, right? And I think he might have had a do-rag or something on, and he takes it off. And you could, not only do you see the emotional layers coming off, but you actually see his physical manifestations of his character, his mask, coming off to the real person. And that was really refreshing, because we had seen this character and what he really was. And it wasn't really that person we saw driving that car at the beginning of that third segment. Want to talk about that, Will, and where you think that really went?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of this comes from the fact that there is so much history between these two characters, but over a very truncated period of time. Like, these aren't characters who dated. These are characters who knew each other in school enough to where they talked a couple of times, and who shared this incredibly intimate encounter on the beach, and who then, like, immediately afterwards got into this fight that got basically the events of that ended up with Chiron spending some time in juvie. Like, so their relationship was very, very hot and cold over a very, very abbreviated point of time. And it was also a decade ago at this point. So, or however long it's been. It's been a while. So all of those feelings come rushing back in the diner, like all of the sorrow, all of the, just kind of the intrigue and the curiosity. And it's shot so beautifully, because I love that scene. This is the scene in the third segment that did it for me, that diner scene, where Black is in there now, Chiron. He's looking around. He sees Kevin, and Kevin is just kind of doing all, he's serving all of these different people. And there's this long moment where you almost wonder, like, is Kevin ever going to notice him? Maybe is Chiron just going to get up and walk out? Like,
Right.
like I thought that's totally like a possible reaction. Like he's just going to like, I can't do this. But with that moment when Kevin notices him and just all of that floods his face, beautifully acted, beautifully shot, and that payoff, that kind of delayed gratification of letting that scene kind of linger a little longer than like to the point of feeling uncomfortable. So good. I loved that, and I loved that the film then segues into, like you mentioned, like him kind of shedding that persona, him sort of letting himself be vulnerable for the first time in probably what was years for him. And I think that this film then gets to this point by the end where I don't know that there is a grand realization. I don't think there's anything that's tidy or in a bow, but he's allowed himself to be vulnerable. He's allowed himself to indulge this part of himself that he's hidden. And I feel like if there's ever a part of him that's going to at least lead to some healing or lead to some character growth, kind of past the frame, like past the film, it all stems from that final sequence. How did you feel about the ending?
I found the ending very hopeful but uncertain at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know how rooted. We suspect that Chiron is very rooted in the character, the hardened character that he's become, and I don't know enough about the character, his situation, to know that he's going to be able to shed that in any kind of permanent or semi-permanent way. For all we know, this was just a one-night kind of reawakening of the real person down deep inside. So it's hopeful, but it also could be very sad, seen as very, very poignant, very sad, because now he may be trapped and can't really become, that person inside him that maybe he really wants to be. It could be that.
Or maybe he can, and this is the first step towards removing some of those layers, even if it's not sudden or right away. Like, I think that for certain people, and Jim, you can definitely expand on this more because you have more of this life experience than others. People that start off in sort of like one part of their life, like people who are like late in life gays, or so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding from a lot of people is it's not just like a switch one day where it's just like straight gay. There's like this really nebulous, uncertain territory in between where you're doubting yourself, you're kind of putting a couple of steps forward, you're retreating a little bit. There's a lot of self-discovery and doubt, and then this like joy of discovery, and all of that matched into all of this confusion. And I've heard all of this from people who've gone through this, and I don't want to speak too much for your experience, Jim, but I want to ask, like, how authentic did that feel as someone who's been through more of this?
Well, I was questioning it because you got the sense that Chiron had put his real self. Now, some of that time, I think it was said that he had to be incarcerated in prison for a while. So that's a perfect formula for like locking yourself away, pun intended, right, inside the shell. But you're right. Maybe it was hopeful, and that character will eventually, that person will eventually emerge. My experience was different. I didn't have to. I guess my shell was different than his.
Yeah.
I was married and family man and kids, and that's kind of the mask that I put on. But eventually, it started to wear away, and the true person inside starts to come out. And I think that's what we're seeing in this scene is just the very beginning of that. For him, at least I choose to think that it's the very beginning of that, as opposed to the sad way that it could go, where he gets a taste of it, but then decides he can't, for some reason, make that a reality. So, I can be hopeful and say, hey, I hope he kind of realizes that he can't really live this way his whole life, and he has to be true to himself and come out and, come out or not come out, but at least come out to himself, right, and live life as the person that he really is. And Whether it's with Juan or somebody else, we don't know. But
yeah, and even if that ending is hopeful, I think it's also sad at the same time. Like, I don't think it has to be one or the other, because even if this is the beginning of a long discovery period where at least he's, kind of for the first time starting to invest in himself again, there's also the sadness of like, holy crap, like he did put himself on the shelf for so long. Like he has denied himself and put on this rough exterior. Like he was not happy. He did not allow himself to be happy. So even if there is an optimism here, there's this like pathos that comes along with it. And I love that we're sitting here at the end of this movie with all of these complex competing emotions that I think are all kind of legit and correct at the exact same time. I need more movies like this.
Right, exactly. A sign of a really great movie that we can talk about. I mean, just one character we're talking about, and the complexities of this character that was able to be put in front of us in a time that was like around 2 hours, right? So, I mean, kudos to this movie. I think we've talked about it a lot. It's apparent that we both love it. We may end up talking about it more again at the end of the year. Who knows? This movie could, people, don't let this be the movie when you're in January and getting ready to watch the Oscars, and everybody's talking about this movie Moonlight that's sneaking into some of these categories, or at least getting buzz mention, and you're like, oh, I never even saw that movie. Don't pass it up. See it. Whether it gets nominated for awards or not, chances are good that you're going to like this movie.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's Moonlight. I think we have a few plugs before we finish up here, Will. I'm going to start out plugging a movie. I saw 5 movies this weekend, which was awesome, which is great. One of the movies I got to see, and Brad's been on a crazy work thing, so he didn't get to see this, but it was called The Edge of 17. This is a coming-of-age film that maybe you may not have heard about, but it's probably in your multiplex right now. It's a coming-of-age movie about a girl named Nadine, who is a junior in high school, who is dealing with a lot of internal emotional awkwardness, some external issues like family issues, and her social awkwardness as well. This movie was really a surprise to me. You may think, oh, Edge of 17, it's another teen comedy, or it's a teen romance. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you think about this movie was more along the lines of something like a Juno. If you remember Juno, as I was watching this movie, I'm like, oh, this is giving me the same vibe as Juno. But Haley Steinfeld is amazing in this movie. She carries this movie, and she is a force to be reckoned with. I think she's you're going to start to see her like really take off and get some roles. The great supporting performances too. Woody Harrelson is in this as a teacher, kind of a very understated performance, but fantastic. I loved him in this role. A fantastic, the way they wrote that character, I think, was wonderful. He's kind of an interesting mentor relationship with Nadine. Kira Sedgwick as the mom in this movie was great. And fresh-faced Blake Jenner shows up in this movie, who we saw in Richard Linklater's movie, Everybody Wants Some, who I think is really good in this movie. So not your typical teen movie. This movie is actually really good, guys. Go out and see this one now in theaters while it's there. Or if you can't get out because you're busy for the holidays, look for it on VOD sometime down the road.
Yeah, co-signed it, Jim. Like, compared to like Bad Santa 2, which we saw earlier, like Edge of 17 doesn't set out to be a comedy. It sets out to be like this interesting look at this teenage girl and the weird things that happen to you as a teenage girl. But I found so much more joy in the joyful moments of this movie. I had so many more laughs at the comedic moments, and I had so many more so much more like pangs in the heart during the more emotional moments. Like this, God, such a good recommendation, Jim.
Good.
I want to plug a film that I think is going to be another one that you're going to be hearing about a lot as we hit the as we dive into award season, and it's a film called Manchester by the Sea. This is a film starring Casey Affleck, and it's got a few other notable names in it too: Michelle Williams, Kyle Chandler, and it's about this guy who. One day he finds out that his older brother, has died. And he is now, because of the way things are willed, he's now the person that's supposed to be the legal guardian for his brother's 16-year-old son. The problem is that Casey Affleck's character has some baggage of his own and isn't ready to take on this role. This is another one of the best performances of the year. Casey Affleck brings A game plus here. I was never unimpressed with him any second of the 135 minutes of this film. All the supporting actors are great. Kyle Chandler, who from like Friday Night Lights, is really, really good here. In fact, the characters it's great. They play a set of brothers named the Chandler brothers. So it's that kept throwing me off, like, because Kyle Chandler played a Chandler. But, but past that, this is a movie with a lot of drama, a lot of really great scenes. You will, like, if you're prone to like tearing up in theaters, this one will get you. And Jim, you mentioned before that you like films with unconventional narrative structures. This one bounces back and forth between the present and the past. Like, the film starts off like kind of midstream, and then it shows us like all of the relationships as they're built and broken and all of that stuff. And it's so much more powerful for being presented that way. This is a film that is probably in the running for, like, when we start talking awards films later in the year. Again, if you're an awards person that follows awards movies, this is one that's going to be getting a lot of buzz and a lot of attention, and it'll probably show up in quite a few categories. So it's only in limited release right now. It just hit. So keep an eye out the next couple of weeks. Probably by Christmas, it'll expand to a theater near you. You should absolutely go watch Manchester by the Sea.
Yeah, well, I mean, we talked about Moonlight being one of my most anticipated movies of the year that I finally got to see after too long a wait. Well, Manchester by the Sea is another one of those movies that I've been dying to see for a number of reasons. Casey Affleck is amazing. If you've seen Gone Baby Gone, right? He's in Gone Baby Gone. Ain't Them Body Saints. He was fantastic in that movie. Well, I don't know if you saw the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford.
No, but that's on everybody's like top of whatever list.
Yeah. The guy's amazing. Plus, not only that, we mentioned earlier when we were talking about Moonlight that I was a married man once, so, married in a hetero relationship. I actually got married in Manchester, of the Manchester by the Sea.
Right. Okay.
Manchester, Massachusetts. So I also had a home in the next town over to that called Essex. And
Essex comes up in the film too. Like they talk about Manchester's relationship to Essex. So
I'm dying to see this movie, and to be honest with you, I'm probably going to end up seeing it with my ex-wife of all people. So because she grew up in Essex, so it's kind of funny. Just hearing you talk about it makes me even more jazzed to see it. So it's not here yet, but as soon as it opens, I'll be seeing it. Sure.
This is such a good time for movies, people. Like I know that everyone is so busy with shopping and travels for family, but I know my particular list right now. Jim, you mentioned you saw like 5 movies over the weekend. I don't know what my count was itself, because I am like, we're in this weird like overabundance of quality films. It happens every time around this year. So please, movie fans, find one of these films or find something else at the movie theater that maybe you hadn't heard of or that piques your interest. Go support cinema. Go support film.
Mm-hmm. Definitely will. All right, so I think that brings us to the close of another show. Come back again. Look for us next week when I think we're going to try to inject some holiday into our some Christmas holiday movie hijinks into our show next week. So it's kind of a surprise. We're going to do something different, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So come back and join us for that. Sounds good, right, Will?
I think it's going to be great. Our idea seems like it's going to be pretty fun. It's definitely fitting for the holidays, and we might even be talking about a new film as well.
Right. So look, in the meantime, look for us on Facebook, Movie Bears Podcast. Go to our website at www.moviebearspodcast.com, or check out our Twitter feed and follow our Twitter feed at MB Podcast for various ramblings on movies and so forth. In the meantime, we'll catch you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.